Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today I've got something pretty darn interesting. I actually recently went to Ross, and when I went to Ross, I happened to stumble upon this, which is the brand new Sound Surge Allosaurus. So that's pretty cool that Ross is getting the newer Sound Surge figures, and they're the first place that I've even seen that has these. So pretty exciting to actually be able to, stumble upon something like that. As far as the packaging goes, it's pretty much the standard. You've got the species name, the Sound Surge logo, Jurassic World in the window area there for the figure. And then if we turn it around, you can see, of course, what we have in this wave, which is the Allosaurus. I guess we'll just do it this way. The Allosaurus, which is up here, and then the Carnotaurus and Spino. So pretty cool to have the Spino now in the line. The Carno looks to be the same figure we probably had before. But let's go ahead, pop this out of the box, and check it out. So here is our Sound Surge Allosaurus, and I must say, this is definitely one of the best looking Sound Surge figures that we have ever had. Mattel really did a good job on this Allosaurus, and considering, they've had a string of kind of awkward and strange looking Allosaurus figures for a little while, it is nice to see this one looking so good. Like, when it comes to that head sculpt, I feel like it perfectly replicates the look of, like, the Battle at Big Rock version of the Allosaurus, which is definitely a massive plus for this one. Sculpt-wise, it's really nice. Paint-wise, definitely very lacking, of course, when it comes to a Sound Surge, or just Mattel in general. But you can see, starting here in the head sculpt, it looks really good. The skin texture looks nice and crisp. You can really see those scales popping on the lower jaw. They look very good. You have a kind of like a tan tone for the primary body color, and then this darker blue that runs over the top of the head, and then just kind of breaks up in patterns all throughout the face. We can see the nostrils right there, the crest as well right there for the Allosaurus. The eyes are painted with a yellow. I don't know if that's a black pupil or if it's just the dark blue. It's such a tiny pupil, it's pretty hard to actually decipher that. You do have an articulated jaw, and in typical Sound Surge fashion, they've only painted the teeth on the upper jaw. So basically, when the mouth is closed, you see that the teeth are painted, but once you open the mouth, you can see now that only half of the mouth is painted, or at least half of the teeth, because technically the inside of the mouth is not at all painted. But you do have a nicely textured tongue in there, and you can see the teeth are sculpted pretty nicely. Again, just not given the gift of color. And we have the skin stretching there for the inside of the mouth. Some okay detail on the upper side of the inside of the mouth as well. The teeth that are showing have like a yellowish tone, and they definitely look a lot sharper and a lot better than a lot of like the older Mattel figures had. So that's definitely a plus. They're not even like, soft figure teeth like we have with the newer ones. Like, they're not soft or squishy, but they just look nice, actually. So that's a huge plus for that area, and you can see again the head sculpt from the other side looking really good. Of course, if we lead down this side, we are going to pick up the battery compartment and the sound area that the Sound Surge figures always have. So that's a little bit depressing, but as you move down, you can see the skin texture again continues to look really nice. We have really beautiful scales as you move down further into the lower part of the dinosaur. Of course, that almost more armored scoot-like look to the upper side. You also have those ridges leading down along the back of the neck that increase and decrease in size as we go. We have that bluish tone continuing to follow along the back of the Allosaurus, but as you reach about the mid-back area, you can see that it starts to pretty much break up, and then it's gone as you move closer into the hip area. As you move down into the arms look pretty good. The muscle definition is nicely shown off. The sculpting of the fingers as well looks pretty nice. And again, the claws, I think, have a fairly decent look to them. Like, they look kind of, sharp and unpainted, but still kind of sharp. The fingers also have some nice scoots moving down them, and there is arm articulation forward and back, which is a little bit stiff, but works fairly decently. Again, moving into the stomach, you do see the battery compartment, so maybe we should switch back to this side. And again, moving into the stomach on this side, you can see the skin texture, again, looking really good. I only saw one of these at my local Ross, but if I happen to encounter another one, probably going to pick the other one up just to repaint, because it is such a beautiful version of the Allosaurus, and you can see that detail is just so crisp. If my camera would focus correctly on it, is just so crisp and really pops in the stomach region right there. We again have more osteoderms and more of that kind of armored look here to the top of the figure as you move along. When it comes to the leg, obviously on this side the leg is taking a step forward, so
this leg is much more obscuring the stomach than what we see on the other side, which actually would have probably worked better over there, because then maybe we wouldn't have seen all of the, openings for the sound and stuff over there as much. But as you move through the leg, we can see the skin texture looking absolutely phenomenal, the muscle definition looking really nice. You've got the kneecap right there, the calf muscle, and then of course a pretty nice looking foot sculpt. As you move down, you've got some nice scoots down the toes, and then you also have the claws, which don't really feature much in the way of fine detail, but they still look pretty decent. And there are dew claws, of course, just unpainted. And I feel like the size of the feet, not too bad overall. Again, they don't look massive or anything, maybe a little bit bigger than I would like, but still pretty good. As you move back here into the tail area, actually also you do have leg articulation forward and back, obviously, and swivel ankles, so pretty much your standard Mattel articulation. But as you move back toward the tail, again, we still have that armored look, just no coloration on the top, and then again, those really nice scales down here on the side, and that leads the entire way out there through the tail, which does have a little bit of a curve to it, which does look quite nice as well. Of course, the tail is short. That's just the way it works with Mattel, but it's not terribly short, so I guess it's got that going for it. And then when you look over here, the biggest difference outside of the fact that we have the sound area and the battery compartment is the fact that the leg is trailing more so than leading on the other side, and the tail curves away from us. But as far as the articulation in the tail goes, you can go left and right, a little bit of up and down, and that's pretty much it. You would think you'd be able to swivel, but the shape of the tail actually prohibits the swiveling. I did notice that as soon as I got it out of the box and put the tail in, I noticed that the swiveling wasn't really working. So not much in the way of swiveling. Like, you can tilt it a little bit, but you can't swivel it all the way around. Like, you can't do a 360 with it like you could with many other Mattel figures. As far as the actual sound aspect goes, there is no action feature. The jaw is just straight up an articulated jaw, but there is, of course, the button for the sound aspect, so there's quite a few noises in there, and they're all pretty fun. Not even all that many actual roars, mostly like grunts and different noises and stuff, but there are, of course, a few roars in there. But that definitely is a fun part of the figure. When it comes to a size for our Allosaurus, it's definitely one of the smaller versions out there. I would say probably close to the same size as the 12-inch basic, but for a length, you were looking at about 13 inches or 33 centimeters, and then for a height, just a hair over 4 3/4 inches, or about 12.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Allosaurus, and you can see again that it does have a pretty nice size, but by no means is a massive figure, especially when it comes to normal Mattel Allosaurus. For another comparison, we have a standard-sized Mattel Baryonyx next to the Allosaurus, and you can very clearly see they're pretty much in the same size range, so this Allosaurus is roughly in like the Wild Roar or Roarivore size range, just, not quite as chunky as the older ones that were in that size range, but still, again, pretty much right there in a similar size as a Mattel Baryonyx. And then for one final comparison, because I know I'm going to get asked for this one, we have the Sound Surge version versus the Hammond Collection Allosaurus. And obviously the size is drastically different, but you can definitely see how similar those head sculpts look. Many of the different Allosaurus that Mattel has produced look vastly different from each other, so it is pretty cool to see that these two resemble each other quite nicely. You could pretty much use this one as a younger version of the same type of Allosaurus in the Jurassic universe, so definitely cool to see these two together, but obviously the size difference is quite drastic. So this is definitely a really nice Sound Surge figure. I think Mattel has outdone themselves when it comes to this, and it is nice to see this because, with the Jurassic World Survival line recently being launched, a lot of those figures are kind of questionable in that line, so it's nice to kind of be able to refresh and go back to just how darn nice Mattel can be when it comes to the sculpts of their figures at times when they're not trying to make them weird or exaggerated. This Allosaurus is gorgeous from head to tail. It's honestly one of my favorite Mattel Allosaurus that they have produced. The sculpt looks really good overall. The fine detail looks really good, really crisp. The tail obviously is a little bit short and the feet are slightly oversized, so, that is a little unfortunate, but for the most part, I think it still looks really quite nice. The paint apps, of course, leave a lot to be desired because there's very little to it, and these are basically like the basic figures with a little bit more articulation and maybe around the same amount of paintwork or slightly less. So you're never going to get much in the way of paint on these figures, but, it looks okay for what it is. If you had like some dark blue paint, you could probably just keep that patterning going down through the body if you really wanted to, but you can see just in general where the blue paint was added, how nice that looks. It looks really good. It does look super naked though once you leave that blue paint. The articulation works pretty nicely. It's not anything incredible, but pretty much the standard stuff. And then, of course, you do have the sound effects there with the button, which is pretty fun. As per usual, the Sound Surge figures do have that large eyesore on the side with the sound area that they, for some reason, don't put on the underside. I don't know why they should, but it is what it is. Maybe it's because the figures are smaller. I don't know, but they do it with the Roarivores, and they're kind of the same size. So I feel like that area being on the side is pretty unnecessary and does look ugly. And also the fact that they, for some reason, couldn't paint the teeth, or even just in general, the inside of the mouth is also a downside for the figure. But also, again, when you come into a Sound Surge figure, at this point, we're very familiar and very aware with how they work, so you kind of expect that. But overall, it is by far one of my favorite Sound Surge figures and also one of my favorite Allosaurus to come from Mattel. So if you are interested, as I said, I picked this one up at Ross, so check your local Ross. Hopefully it'll be there, and if not now, hopefully sometime soon. And if I find anywhere else in the meantime where you can order it, I will include it in the description. So make sure you grab this if you can, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.